Welcome back to Operation Evil. This is episode 126. I'm your host, Nyoka.
And I am your co-host, Megan.
And before we jump into Megan's case, I do want to take a moment and welcome any new listeners. Thank the ones who keep coming back and let everyone know that we love and appreciate their support. And also, our episodes can now be found on the YouTube.
Woohoo!
And this is a continuation of last month's April Child Abuse Prevention Month. She is going to cover something local. She will give you the title of that here in just a moment. And also, this episode does need a warning. So, warning. This episode contains disturbing content, including child sexual abuse. And as always, listener discretion is advised, especially with this one. Take it away.
All right. So, yes, this is an extension of April's Child Abuse Prevention Month. I think we'll have just a couple more discussing like the actual procedures that go along with investigating these types of things. But today's isn't so much about the individual as much as it is about the procedure and the appeal that occurred and such. So before I go on anymore, I'll just tell you what the title is. The person that we're going to be speaking about is John R. Whalen. This is a local Kentucky case. It's an older case, but anyways, October 20th, 2000. So 25 years ago, at approximately 1:10 p.m., John Whalen's son visited the Fort Mitchell Police Department, and he was reporting disturbing findings at his father's residence. He stated that on 10/19/2000, he found a small handheld video camera in his father's dresser drawer. When he viewed the contents of the tape, he saw his father on the couch in the residence with his pants around his ankles, with what appeared to be a 14 or 15-year-old male seated next to him. The juvenile's pants were around his ankles and his father was masturbating him. John's son was so distraught with the contents that he had to report it, because if it was anyone else, he would. The son also stated that his father kept a footlocker in the basement, and years ago when he was young, he saw a videotape of his father's that had in it a child involved in sex, so the son knew he had tapes of the sort in the locker. On October 20th, 2000, at approximately 4:17 p.m., two officers responded to the Whalen residence to execute a search warrant. Upon arrival, the officers identified themselves, and John Whalen had stated he knew why they were there. Two other officers assisted the first two responding officers in the execution of the warrant. Whalen took one officer to the basement where the footlocker was located, at which time the officer asked to view its contents. Whalen asked if he had to open it, and the officer advised that he did. Whalen handed the officer the key and advised him that once the padlock was removed, that he needed a knife to open it. Whalen was then asked if he owned a small handheld video camera. Whalen had stated that he did, but loaned it to a friend on October 15th, which he did not divulge who that person was and feared that obviously he would get that person in trouble. However, he took another officer to the camera's location. At this time, he had asked that officer questions: if he was going to be arrested, what would happen if he left, how long the search would take, etc. The officer stated that he wouldn't be arrested as of right then, and he had reason to believe the camera was at the residence on the 19th. Because again, remember, the son had come in and stated that he was there on the 19th and found it. Whalen asked who would be viewing the contents in fear of embarrassment and asked if consent played a role. The officer stated several factors had to be considered, and they planned on searching everywhere the camera could be in his residence. Whalen asked the officer what he thought might be on the tape, and the officer stated he thought Whalen and a teenager would be masturbating each other. Whalen agreed to show him the camera's location, which was in the living room end table. Both the officer and Whalen went to the basement to view a portion of the tape's contents with the officer who was in the basement. At that time, Whalen stated the young man in the video was someone he knew from the neighborhood, and gave his name, stating he was a sophomore at Cov Cath, around 15 to 16 years old. He further stated it was consensual and it had occurred on the afternoon of October 18th, 2000. The officers asked for additional details, which Whalen then asked for an attorney. And for those of you listening, Cov Cath actually is Covington Catholic. It's a school in the that's local to Northern Kentucky.
Yeah, it's a pretty good school too, isn't it?
It's a very good school, very, very prestigious
Can
school.
you imagine being the son though and
I
finding
can't.
that? And oh, was the son around that same age or was he an adult? Do you know?
Um, he was an adult, I think, at this time. I don't want to give any more information on
Oh,
him.
okay. Gotcha.
I want to stay away from that. But um he was an adult at that time, and he did state that as a child he remembers seeing something that just wasn't right.
Mm,
I can't imagine even living with that knowledge, knowing that my father
mhm.
might have something like that, because when you're a child, you trust your parents. And he also, John Whalen, had a wife as well. So, and I don't want to speak about their relationship or her either, but I can't imagine being married to somebody and finding this out. Or,
Mhm.
I can't imagine the trust that's lost, and
Yeah.
especially a child, like
And then
his
you
own
think
kid.
like, oh my God, all the sleepovers that I had when my friends
Correct.
came over and things like
Correct.
that. I don't
Uh-huh.
know.
All the things running through your head.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the search was concluded and items were seized, all of which was noted on the search warrant, and a copy was left at the residence. That's standard procedure. This tape was reportedly recorded on October 18th. If you recall, by Whalen, who also gave the juveniles info to the officers, it was recorded on the 18th. On October 23rd, 2000, the reporting officer went to Covington Cath in an attempt to identify the juvenile. He was identified by staff, and the reporting officer spoke with his mother at the police department. She viewed a portion of the tape. I can't imagine watching that.
Nope.
And identified the white male as her son, age 14, and stated she did not know the man in the tape. She stated she would pick up her son from school and bring him to the police department to speak to investigating officers. I know, you know, I can't talk about this either, but something happened to my daughter at daycare. I'm not going to say which one. But something happened to my daughter at daycare. And when I found that out, I was livid. I mean, you couldn't keep me. I ended up calling into work, I think 3 days straight, getting attorneys, getting the police department, you know, I can't imagine. I can't imagine being the parent in this at this time,
Yeah.
viewing my child. So, anyways, October 23rd, 2000, at approximately noon, Fort Mitchell police interviewed a 14-year-old male who attended Cov Cath as a freshman. Prior to Cov Cath, as we call it, he was a student at Blessed Sacrament. He stated he knew John Whalen since 8th grade at Blessed Sacrament when he met him through interactions with who he thought was his son. One day during the early summer months, the 14-year-old male, who I will call Juvenile, went to Whalen's house to see if his son was home. John answered the door and stated the son was not home, but asked if he wanted to come watch TV with him. Now, I do not know if this kid ever existed. I don't know if he's talking about his own son, but his son was much older. Like his biological son was much older.
Hmm.
So I don't know who he's talking about, and I never find that out. But anyways, the juvenile agreed to come inside, and John put on a porno tape in the VCR. They both watched the tape, and John gave the juvenile vodka and cigarettes. John started masturbating and asked to masturbate the juvenile, which he agreed. After they finished, John told him not to say anything to anyone about giving alcohol to the juvenile. This occurred 4 or 5 more times over the course of the summer, by John initiating with a phone call to come over and watch TV with him. The juvenile was clearly scared and embarrassed and didn't know what to do. The same thing played out each time. Porn on the VCR, vodka, cigarettes, etc. The last time, the juvenile had expressed that he no longer wanted it to occur. John told him okay, but didn't want him to tell anyone. The juvenile was asked if he knew that he was being videotaped as these occurrences happened, and he stated he had no idea. Also, on October 23rd, 2000, another reporting officer obtained expert opinion that the magazines seized contained photographs of minor children engaged in sexual activity. October 24th, 2000, the investigation continued. The reporting officer viewed the videotape that was seized during the execution of the search warrant. The tape showed Whalen and a white male on the couch watching TV, engaging in conversation. Whalen pulls his pants down and starts masturbating. The white male then pulls his pants down and started to masturbate. Whalen then reached over and started masturbating the white male while masturbating himself, and this occurred for several minutes. In the list of evidence seized was the handycam with the video contents, the footlocker containing 159 porno magazines videos, which some had teenage or boys or high school within the name, and also 8mm reels with various names, and the key to the footlocker. The search warrant specifically described the residence and the property to be searched, which was videotapes and video recording equipment. Also, specifically calling out that the property seized shows means, intent, shows a crime has been committed, and contraband based upon the son's report of his findings. I have a picture of the footlocker to be included. John Whalen was arrested for the crime of use of a minor in a sexual performance, a Class B felony. He was taken to the detention center and held on $10,000 bond. On November 1st, 2000, a reporting officer received information that a juvenile at a local detention center had advised his attorney of Whalen's arrest, stating he had been with Whalen several times in the past, where Whalen had picked him and a friend up and took them back to his house. An interview was set up by the reporting officer. On November 2nd, 2000, the reporting officer met with the victim at the detention center. The juvenile, I'll call him juvenile from now on, the juvenile stated that he would hang out at a corner in Covington, Kentucky, where John in a white Mercedes Benz would frequent. He stated that he first met John April of 2000. He approached the juveniles and asked two of them to take a ride for a drink. The juveniles agreed. The juvenile then gave a description of the house in Fort Mitchell and that he led them to the basement. He described the basement room setup and the bar. He also stated Whalen said he would not drink, at which time Whalen pulled his pants down. The juveniles removed their pants and Whalen performed oral sex on them. The juvenile stated that he saw John give the other juvenile $40 on a few occasions, but alcohol was his motive, so he never took money. These similar instances happened 4 or 5 times. The juvenile gave a description of John that he had gray, fuzzy hair, eyes a little crossed, in his 60s, and not a large man, who also had a Ford Tempo. John would normally pick them up around 1 or 2 p.m. during the day for these instances, and the juvenile was able to identify the basement and some contents via photographs. John was charged with the use of a minor under the age of 16 in a sexual performance on 12/15/2000 via grand jury. He was sentenced 3/28/2001 for 12 years in prison with 40 days credit. I would assume that that was the time served while awaiting to post bail, would be my assumption. But I do believe he ended up posting bail. That same day, he was that same day, he was sent the duty to register as a sex offender notification. 3/29/2001, there was a notice of appeal for the suppression of evidence. Now, normally in these cases, in any case, any criminal case, they'll usually appeal it anyway. Like that's just what they'll do. In this case, it was to suppress evidence. They also tried for a motion for pre-release pending appeal, which was denied. The appeals court gave an affirming opinion on 3/22/2002. So I normally don't go through and just read a whole report, but I want to read this because I want you to hear it from the appellate court's perspective. When an appeal like this comes in, in this instance, it has to do with the search warrant. So if you noticed before, I said that the search warrant specifically states what they're looking for and where they're looking for it.
Hmm.
So if a search is bad, obviously, if I am looking for, I don't know, stupid example. If I'm looking for, well, that's a dumb example too. I don't know. Can you think of an example, Nyoka?
If you're looking for a camera, a disposable camera, um, in your kitchen drawer. So,
Well, I don't know. I think that would be a good one.
oh.
uh, I am so brain fried when it comes to nighttime. How about this? How about I am looking for a Subaru Forester and I come into your house? Like, you know
Okay.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's got to be something, it's got to be somewhere that thing would be. So specifically stating, they said, the video and any videoing equipment, right? So yeah, they can search the house, they can search the basement, they can, they can search certain things. So again, this is where they're going with this. So this is the appeal, October 2000. Four officers from the Fort Mitchell Police Department in Kenton County executed a search warrant at the residence of John Whalen. They seized numerous items, including an 8mm videotape allegedly depicting Whalen and a 14-year-old boy engaged in sexual activity. Soon thereafter, the grand jury indicted Whalen for the offense of using a minor in a sexual performance. Whalen moved to suppress all the evidence taken from his residence, including the 8mm videotape and camera, which at that point were the only items the Commonwealth intended to introduce. But that motion failed, and he thereupon pled guilty, reserving the right to appeal the suppression issue. By judgment entered March 28th, 2001, the Kenton Circuit Court sentenced him to 12 years in prison. This appeal then followed. Whalen contends that the search warrant for his residence failed to specify the objects of the search with the particularity required by both the federal and Kentucky constitutions, and that the executing officers extended their search beyond even the excessive terms of the warrant. We are convinced, however, that the warrant was valid and its execution essentially lawful. To the extent, if any, that items were seized beyond the scope of the warrant, the proper remedy in this case, as the trial court ruled, was not to suppress all of the seized items, but only those in excess of the warrant. Accordingly, we affirm. The warrant at issue was signed and executed on October 20th, 2000. It authorized a search of Whalen's Fort Mitchell residence for, quote, videotapes and video recording equipment, end quote. It was based on the affidavit of the investigating detective who averred that Whalen's son had come to the police station only hours before and reported that he had discovered in his father's residence a small handheld video camera containing a recorded dated October 17th, 2000 that depicted his father engaging in sexual activity with a boy, Whalen's son, thought to be about 14 years old. Between 4 and 4:30 that afternoon, four officers took the warrant to Whalen's residence to execute it. Two of the officers, the detective who had prepared the application and his immediate supervisor, carried out the search, while the two others watched Whalen and his wife. The two searching officers testified at the suppression hearing, and while it is not clear from their testimony or otherwise clear from the record whether the affidavit was attached to the warrant, it is clear that both were familiar with the affidavit prior to the search. Both testified they were in search of tapes and equipment that might be those Whalen's son had reported, and not, for example, ordinary commercial videos. As soon as the detective had read the warrant to him, Whalen led the detective to a footlocker in his basement where he kept various sex-related items. In the locker, the detective saw, among other things, videotapes with labels and magazines with covers suggesting child pornography. The locker also contained a few Playboy magazines and other adult sexual materials. It was soon clear that the locker did not contain a video camera, so rather than make a detailed inspection of the footlocker's contents, the officers resumed their primary search. In response to Whalen's inquiry, one of the officers told him that they intended to look every place the camera might be. Thereupon, Whalen produced the camera, which still contained the tape his son had viewed. After the officers had watched a portion of the tape, they seized it, the camera, and the footlocker with its contents, some 150 items. Whalen contends that the warrant did not adequately specify the videotape or type of videotape for which the officers could lawfully search. And he claims that the seizure of the footlocker with its many non-videotape items flagrantly exceeded the warrant's scope. Although we disagree with both contentions, we need not address them in detail because even if the warrant and search be deemed to some degree flawed, the flaws are not such as would call for the blanket suppression Whalen seeks. Whalen is correct, of course, that both the federal Fourth Amendment, that's your search and seizure, and Section 10 of the Kentucky Constitution prohibit general warrants, warrants which, in effect, allow the government to rummage at large through one's belongings on the chance that something incriminating will turn up.
Well, it's a good thing they did.
Uh-huh.
That's just my opinion.
The constitutional provisions are intended to make such warrants impossible by requiring that no warrant shall issue except upon probable cause, and that all warrants shall, quote, particularly describe the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized, end quote. The relationship between the particularity requirement and the probable cause requirement is worth noting. A finding of probable cause, of course, requires that there be particular facts suggesting a reasonable probability of a particular crime. A search warrant issued on the basis of such probable cause need only limit the object of the search to things genuinely related to those facts and probative of that crime. Whalen is also correct in noting that when the relationship between warrant and probable cause breaks down, suppression of the evidence is often the remedy. When the breakdown is severe, when the warrant on its face purports to authorize a search far in excess of that justified by probable cause, or when the executing officers flagrantly disregard the warrant's limitations, in effecting converting the warrant to a general one, then a blanket suppression of the evidence may be called for. The general rule, however, is that, quote, the remedy for an overboard warrant or an overboard search is to sever the overboard portions of the warrant from those portions that are sufficiently particular, end quote. This is exactly the remedy the trial court provided. It found, and we agree, that the warrant validly authorized the officers to search for the tape and the camera Whalen's son reported. It is arguable, perhaps, that the warrant could have further specified the sort of tape or tapes they were to seek, but it is clear, as the court also found, that both officers were aware of the facts establishing probable cause and understood the object of their search accordingly. It is also arguable, perhaps, that the seizure of the footlocker and its entire contents, particularly after the officers had found the very tape and camera they wanted, exceeded somewhat the basis for the search. Even if it did, however, it certainly did not amount to a flagrant disregard of the warrant or have the effect of converting the search to a general one. The footlocker contents, after all, were all in one place and could plausibly have been thought probative of the particular crime authorized to look for. The trial court, moreover, recognized the possibility that some of the footlocker items had been inappropriately seized and assured Whalen that it would exclude any of that evidence ultimately determined to have been seized in excess of the warrant and not admissible under an exception to the warrant requirement. This is all the relief to which Whalen was entitled. We affirm, accordingly, the March 28th, 2001 judgment of the Kenton Circuit Court. All concur. So, with that being said, on July 22nd, 2009, he was granted conditional discharge.
What does that mean?
Well, he was conditionally discharged and he was let out of prison and he was on, supervision. He did pass away in 2014, in January of 2014. His obituary can be found.
Wait, he passed away in 2014?
Uh-huh.
I thought when was he arrested?
In 2001 was the appeal.
Oh.
Yeah, he was arrested, I think, or he was charged on December of 2000. So yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So other things to note that when he was out on bond and when he was uh on, just out and about in public, he was caught a few times with kids. And that obviously sent him back. So but after the 2009, I don't think anything. I think that was it. Um, I don't know any more about that case.
Oh my
But
gosh. Oh
the
my
reason
gosh.
why I bring this up is because the police don't have an easy job when it comes to these things. And the reason why I bring this case up is because it is 25 years old and they're already questioning videotapes and video cameras. Think about the technology today. Think about what, they have to ask for today. They have to ask for digital evidence. Well, what's digital evidence these days? I mean, I
Anything.
could, right. So it just, I know when I was teaching the forensic evidence class, one thing that I would always say is, you need to be careful because I remember this case. I can't remember the details because that was many years ago too, but there was a gentleman who would go outside and rip off Wi-Fi. And see, when you track IP addresses, you can share child pornography over the internet and it is literally national or
Mhm.
international at that point in time. Okay. So you can face hefty charges. Well, they were trying to get this family for child for child pornography.
And it was somebody on their Wi-Fi?
And it was somebody sitting outside in a van on their Wi-Fi.
Oh
So here they
my
went in, they served the search
gosh.
warrant, they asked for all computers, all digital technology, all these things, and the family's like, "What are you doing?" You know what I mean? I mean, they were totally confused. They were totally, you know, just taken back by it. And here they're, the police are unjust and all this. No, well, the police came back to your IP address and they're not wrong. It just happens to be the guy sitting outside in the van ripping off their
Mm.
Wi-Fi. So that's why it's always
Mm.
important. Like I know where you work, where it says we are a safe internet shopping zone. That's why, because
Yeah.
you have a secure
Hmm.
internet. But at this, it's just crazy to me. It's crazy to me to think about all of the avenues of technology these days, what it takes to investigate this type of crime or, any type of crime that has to do with the internet. Because you figure I mean, people probably still do use handheld cameras, but now we've got phones that link straight to email, that link straight to social media. I know that
I mean,
in
the
the
laws aren't even caught up with our technology.
correct, and technology changes every day.
Yeah.
It's impossible to stay up with the laws.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of laws, we just shared on the Facebook page about Ohio's grooming laws. So that has changed. That specifically states, hang on, I got
I
that
can't
pulled up.
believe that wasn't illegal before. That blew my mind.
Well, here's the definition. So it's now a crime for someone 18 or older to engage in a pattern of conduct with a minor who is less than 16 years of age and who is 4 or more years younger than the person with the purpose to entice, coerce, or solicit the minor to engage in sexual activity. So that's pretty specific if you ask me. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
it is.
That's not covering all the bases. That's not just saying entice, coerce, or solicit a minor. That's not what that says. So, we need tighter laws, we need stricter laws. How? How could we do that without making it too general that it's not going to serve its purpose?
Yeah, that's true.
So there's things to consider here. But again, I just go back, we've already shared safety on the internet. We've already shared all of that. But I mean, you can never be too safe. You can never be too safe with your kids. You can never be too safe with anything. If you see something, say something. And that's pretty much all I have. I just wanted to
That was
reiterate the importance
crazy.
of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, that case wasn't so much about what the gentleman did. It's more about the search, how it was conducted, how it was questioned, the appeal that went into it, all of the
Yeah.
work that went into it,
It's
all
like
of
the
the work that
behind the
went into
scenes.
keeping him behind bars. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Which is a different take from what we usually tell. So I'm glad that you did it.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. Lock
So,
your Wi-Fi's, people.
mhm.
Use secure internet, please. Oh my gosh. Yeah. If you guys have anything that you want to start a conversation about, like regarding this episode, please do. Like, we want a conversation. It'd be good. But I thought this was a unique take. So thank you for sharing that. Now, if you can't get enough of Operation Evil, consider supporting the podcast by joining our Patreon. Regardless of what tier that you pick, you will have a shout out from us in at least one bonus episode every month that is exclusive to our supporters. We currently have, I think, 41 bonus episodes ready for you to binge over there. The link to join can be found in our show notes. If you cannot join our Patreon, consider supporting us by rating our show, telling a friend about the podcast, liking and sharing our posts on Facebook. Like every little thing is it means a lot and we appreciate you for doing that and for sharing. So, thank you guys again for
Thank you.
listening
Thank you.
and we'll be back next time with a new episode. Goodbye.
Goodbye.